Welcome everyone to Heart Snuggles. We're stoked you're here today, and I brought a lovely guest from a mastermind I did once upon a time. And yeah, I'm so excited to introduce you to him. So go ahead and tell them who you are.
What's going on, Lexy? Hi guys, Mike Morelli here from Peak Prosper, and I co-lead a company where we help adventurous men find meaningful work that's aligned with their purpose. So really stoked to jump on the podcast today and share some insights and maybe some new resources for you.
Yeah, it's so epic. I love what you do because I'm extremely adventurous and I've never heard anything like that, especially focused towards men, which I think is very important because there's not enough men's group. There's so many women's groups. So it's like, yes, thank you for doing this work. And the question of the podcast is, what was the last random act of kindness someone did for you?
The last random act of kindness? That's a great question. So Mike, can I share a little backstory to this?
Please, yeah.
Yeah. So this weekend, so right now I'm living down in Costa Rica. It was kind of a dream for me to live more of a digital nomad life when I just started to start this business. And so this weekend, me and my buddy, we went out, we rented a car and we drove around Costa Rica and we were just kind of exploring. And you know, that one law that everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Like it was
definitely know that.
Yeah, it was that kind of trip. We actually are big surfers, and there's this Playa Hermosa, which is a famous break in Costa Rica, and it was pumping this weekend. The conditions were really good, and we drove 2 hours north in the wrong direction. We showed up at the beach. It was completely flat. There was no surf, and there's like fishing boats, and we're like, "What the hell's going on?" So I walk up, and this guy, I go like, Playa Hermosa. Like I'm trying to speak in Spanish and ask him where the surf was. And him and his friends start laughing. And he goes, "Yeah, you went to the wrong beach. It's like now it's like a 6-hour drive south."
No.
So yeah. So we just said, oh my gosh, we were so angry and we're driving around on these dirt roads and we're getting lost. And long story short, we wind up going to this national park and going hiking. And on the way out, we see this soda, and a soda in Costa Rica is like a local eatery, really cheap food. And it was run by this girl and her sister. Kids are playing out in the front yard, barn animals playing in the backyard. It's just like everything you had dreamed up in Costa Rica. And although, you know, it's obviously not about the money, she comped like some of the meal. She loved us. We were taking photos together and she didn't charge us the full price. It didn't matter anyways, but it was a random act of kindness that she didn't need to do. And it was just a little memory that me and my buddy will remember for a long time, because it was one of those travel experiences that it was like, oh, this is so truly Costa Rica right here. So it's just, yeah, it was more about the story than the couple of dollars she saved, if that makes sense.
Yeah, always. I mean, just like when someone buys you coffee, it's like, it makes a big impact, but it's literally $4. Like, let's be real. But it's that thoughtfulness and that, just that connection. It's like you can feel that between you two. So that's a really beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. And so classic, like every time you travel, something's bound to go wrong one way or another. So
especially in Costa Rica. I mean, the story over the weekend, it just kept kind of unraveling that way. And I'll save the details, but it's just, that's always the good thing about traveling, right? Because it gets you kind of into that place where you have to let go. Well, at least you hope so.
Oh, you better, or else you're going to be struggling.
Totally.
Yeah, you have to be non-attached to the outcomes and the plans and go with flow. I think that's one of the biggest keys I've learned with traveling as well. And that brings me to your business, being an adventurous man. Tell us how you started it.
Yeah, so another great question, Lexy. So about 2 years ago, I was working in Jackson Hole. This is a mountain town out in Wyoming. And I love to ski. I love to climb and just be overall exploring. And at that time I was working as a server in a fine dining steakhouse. And at that time I was making, you know, anywhere around like $350 a night. And for me at that time, it was like, wow, this is a ton of money. I'm working 6-hour shifts, maybe 4 to 5 days a week. I'm being able to ski every single day because I don't have to show up till work at 4 p.m. And I had stayed in that job too long. The first year it was cool, but you hit that plateau very early on. You kind of reach that potential point. And for me, and I'm not opposed to anyone doing a serving job. It was a great experience for me. But about a year, I started to become very frustrated by it. And I stayed in for about a year and a half too long. I wound up doing another couple seasons and hitting this breaking point of just total burnout, frustration. At that time, I was trying to recover from a traumatic injury that I had to my ankle. And it just reached a point where I was like, I have to quit. I felt like a modern day slave, right? Like you show up, you check in, you get your paycheck, and you're like grinding for someone else's dream. And I wanted to live my own dream. So when COVID hit, I said, you have to do something different now because the writing is on the wall. And that's when I went back home to New York. And just like happenstance, right? I landed upon this consulting course that helped me kind of like really start to understand my natural strengths and talents. And I wound up kind of going into the coaching realm. And so that's how this whole thing really started. And it's obviously been a huge process to get to what we do now. Because at first I was just like a general life coach, like, oh, you're struggling. Let me help you with anything. But just through that process of kind of following your nose and curiosity, it's led to this moment. And so that's how it started, right? That's how it started.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm so proud of you for listening to that calling because, I hear it all the time. People know that feeling, but they don't act on it. And so how do you help people support them through that? Because I think a lot of people know what burnout feels like. People know what not an aligned path feels like, but it's like, where's that bridge to get them there?
Yeah. And it took me a long time to realize this, but it's clarity fundamentally. And because I think I believe that when you're clear about where you're going in life, things will happen for you, right? Like what you focus on expands. And the simple truth to that is that if you have an anxious thought, just focus on it. And what happens? You produce more anxiety, right? The number one reason most people don't get what they want in life is because they don't know what they want. And a lot of the times we say things like, yeah, I know what I want. I want to be rich. I want to be this. All right. But you don't really want that because if you break down what someone really wants, there's 3 levels to it, right? There's wanting, there's choosing, and there's committing. So there's 3 levels of desire. And most people get stuck at wanting. They say, I want a better job. I want that amazing girl. I want that amazing relationship. I want to be financially free. But that doesn't mean anything. And if you do find yourself saying this, don't take this personally, but wanting is useless. If you ask the majority of the world how many people want to be rich, what percentage of the world would say me? If you ask that question,
pretty much everyone.
Pretty much everyone, but very few people are. And so there's no emotional desire behind wanting something. And all actions that we take in life are driven by emotion. So you have to go to the next level, which is choosing. And when you start choosing, saying, oh, and I choose to be rich, or I choose to create my own business, or whatever the case may be, it's one step better. You're putting your feet in the water now, right? And you're starting to find ways to get solutions, but you're still holding yourself back. When you choose something, there's still like some fears or whatever, the what ifs holding you back. So that's why people kind of go 50-50. But when you commit to something, it really means to just burn off all other options. You're essentially saying to the universe, hey, this is what I want, and I'm committed to getting it, and I'm not going to stop until I get it. And when you go to that level, always, it's so scary at first, but when you go to that level of committing, which is like the number one thing guys have a problem with in this world, guys have such a problem with committing to things, is that when you do it, the universe will conspire to work in your favor.
Yes. I love that. And I think like the wanting is more ego. It's like, it's not true to your heart most of the time, or if it is, it's like, you need to go deeper into like the levels. I love that. I've never heard it in that way. And I think that's such a great process. And commitment, let's talk about that. Why do you think men fear commitment so much?
It's a great question. I think, we grow up in a world where we're told to kind of be the jack of all trades. And then, it's an interesting dynamic because, men are supposed to be the leaders, and we're supposed to be the tough guy, and we're supposed to be, handle.
Even as you change your tone of voice.
Right. Yeah. Just for dramatic effect.
Yeah.
but we've got to be that. You watch all these movies and we get indoctrinated and programmed from a very young age that, men are these guys on the battlefields and they're bloodied and war torn and they're just, come on, they're like carrying the tribe. And yeah, that is an evolutionary thing. Men were typically the hunters, right? We went out, but it's not that we have to be this jack of all trades, do everything type of guy. And in fact, being a real leader is focusing on just the essentials, being really good at the essentials. And so I think that's why we're scared to commit to things, because we feel like we have to go and do everything. And of course, that's just kind of one viewpoint on it. But I think that, yeah, committing is really scary. There's like a fear of loss. That's a huge thing in our society. We're more scared to lose something than we actually are to gain it. And so I think these factors really play in. But fundamentally, Lexy, I think the biggest thing here is that you have to realize that it's just programming, right? From a very young age, human beings are programmed to believe certain things. And that's, I think, the number one reason why we stay stuck at our current levels, because we have these beliefs about who we are, who we should be, the path that we should follow. And we run into our own walls that we've set upon ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what have you done to work through those walls and those beliefs?
Yeah. So it's awareness, right? You cannot change anything until you have awareness, right? Like, so if you don't know a problem exists, how can you change it? And so here's a really good exercise for anyone listening to this podcast, male, female, it doesn't matter. If you want to really start to gain true awareness of how you have been programmed, let's think about it this way. There's three ways. And humans have been programmed via verbal, right? Things people have said to you, modeling, things that you've witnessed from maybe your mom or your dad or your close friends or family, like their specific behavior patterns. And then the third would be specific experiences, which is an experience like for me, when I shattered my heel bone in a climbing accident, traumatic, something I'll remember for a long time. Kind of created deep-rooted belief systems. So if we think about verbal programming, think about what people have said to you in terms of career, right? So we'll start off here. How many times have people heard, you got to get a safe and secure job? And when you hear that enough, right? Lexy, how many times in your life have you heard from maybe your parents, your friends, from people, you got to get a safe and secure job?
Everyone. Most people have told me that.
Yeah. Most especially people will tell you that.
Doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, it's when you think that, okay, job equals safety and security, you're really chasing an illusion, because safety and security is living in fear, right? So when you're chasing security, you're really you're making decisions based upon fear. That's a really, really powerful concept when you think about it that way. And so when you realize that, wow, get a safe and secure job is not the truth. It's just what a group of people have decided to be true and said it over and over again. You can see that and go, oh my God, like that is just something that I've repeatedly been told. It doesn't mean that it's true. And that frees you. It frees you from the belief system. And that's what's really powerful about awareness. Does that, do you resonate with that?
Yeah, it makes, you have to meet yourself where you're at. It's so important to know where are you and what beliefs you have and what's been holding you back. And like you said, the walls that you have around you. And then it's like, how can you open that perspective? Because it's so funny how we keep ourselves in these tiny, tiny boxes. And like you said, like when you get that either like permission from someone else doing that, or you see that like you can actually change that belief. Like every time I feel that feeling of like, wow, it's so expansive, like, holy shit, there's so much more in this world, like it's so great. And I think that's, it's just more people need to be teaching these ways instead of the like typical ways, the secure path. And so, and really security comes from within, like all those things you're seeking outward and it's an internal thing. And so how do you help people like realize it's like what other ways they can find security that aren't in that like typical path?
Yeah, totally. So with this first step, we talk about, just building that awareness. And just the tip that I was going to say to people is You can list out the ways that you feel like that you've been programmed, right? We talk about, again, just verbal modeling and specific incidences. And you can write out essentially how these things around career, job, and money have had an effect on your life. Like, what are some things that you've heard and seen a lot, and how have they affected you? That's the exercise. Very simple. And so to answer your question, Lexy, the thing that we fundamentally do, right, is we get this awareness point of really, through the awareness, you can start to understand yourself rather than what the world has been kind of labeled upon you. Oh, you're this type of learner, you're that type of learner. So that's the awareness stage. Next, you go into just defining some sort of vision that you feel drawn to. This is such a crucial step because, again, we talked about if we don't define what we do want, someone will define it for us. And so this is where a lot of people get stuck, is because they think that when I define something that I want, that it needs to be at first like razor sharp. So, for example, it's far better to just list some things that you feel internally drawn towards now rather than the end destination. Most people are focusing on the end result, which is like a mechanical engineering job in this specific field, making this amount of money. If you don't know that yet, don't worry about it. So for me, when I first started off, I didn't know that I was going to be a coach. I didn't even know that this was going to exist. Here's what I knew that I wanted: financial freedom, a job in a business that I could work remotely and work from anywhere, and a job where I could impact hundreds and thousands of people. That's all I knew. And I wrote it down. Once I started saying, okay, how do I find these things? How do I do these things? And I started to research those, opportunities started to come up for me. So for example, 2 weeks after I had defined that, my mom comes up to me. She goes, hey, remember how you're talking about you're trying to like start a business that you can work from anywhere? I said, yeah. She goes, hey, there's this course that I think you should take. It's called Consulting Accelerator by Sam Ovens. I have to give him a shout out. That course changed my life. And so I go, okay, like, let me check it. So within the first week, it helps you do a deep dive into really understanding yourself at a core level and like what you're uniquely good at. And through that process, I started to say, oh my God, it's coaching, because I have so much of this knowledge and specific skill set. And I started to teach it. And when you start to apply these things in real life, again, more opportunities. And so when you get those opportunities, you get more clarity. And that's when that clarity component comes in. It is not something that you think about. Clarity is not sitting around saying, how do I do that? What are my next steps? You have to go apply in the real world, and the real world will give you the answers and the clarity. So once you get that clarity, you go back to your vision and you rework it. It went from, I want financial freedom, to now maybe it's more like, I know that I want to be making, my financial freedom is $10,000 a month. And it just gets clearer and clearer and clearer. So that's really the next step in the process.
Yeah, that's great. And that's super important. And I love that too, because we just think too much. Like, we're always stuck in our minds, and
Always.
We get lost. And then that's when we get trapped, is like when we like try to be so also structured and like even like linear, like you said, like you have this goal, and you have to be open to the possibilities and new things that come along the way to reaching your goals. And like what you think you might want may not actually be what you want. And so it's just like having that adaptability and flexibility. And yes, the signs will always come. It's like, how can I be present and seeing like what is being brought to me? What can I say yes to? And like, what is aligned with me?
So there's two things that I want to, because you just nailed it right there. And there's two things that I want to speak on about that. The first is that you said things will come to me. And this is where people get lost, Lexy, because we think that, oh, that's like some woo-woo, like spiritual thing. No, you have to understand that the way energy works in nature is that if water is flowing down a mountain stream, right, and there's a rock in the stream, it doesn't try to go through the rock. It hits the rock and goes around it, right? And so when we have opportunities that come up to us, I guarantee every single person on this podcast can think of a moment, a really profound moment in their life where they got a dream or a goal that was accomplished, but they were like totally surprised by it, right? Can you think about something for you, like in your business, that was like that?
Yeah. I mean, even just this business in general, how it started, like I was volunteering at a holistic health retreat in Australia, and my roommate, her name was Daisy. I love her so much. And she was a life coach and she was telling me what she does. And I was like, wait, you get paid to do that? Like, what do you mean? And I was like, how do I get started? And she's like, you don't even need a certification. You can just start. And like, that was just like the biggest blessing ever because it felt like such a yes to me. I was like, this is exactly what I want to be doing. I didn't know that I was going to meet her. I didn't know anything about life coaching. It was just like, it fell into my lap and it was such a miracle. Like, yeah. And so I think that was just such a blessing that I could have never seen, but I just followed my intuition to like, okay, this health retreat sounds awesome. I'm sure I'll meet aligned people. Like it's kind of in the field I want to be in. And then boom, that opportunity came.
Perfect example of what we're talking about here. And then the second thing that I was going to touch on, because you talked about how we spend so much time thinking and thinking and thinking. One of the biggest reasons why so many, again, we work with men, but so many men get caught up in this trap of, how many guys have said to me on the phone, Mike, I don't know what I want, but I guess I just need to think about it. And I say to that, you have to stop thinking, because every single time that you think about your future, you're trying to predict your future based on your past. And what that means is that when you think about something, the only knowledge and answers that you have available to you are things that you have previously lived. If you were living that life, right? If you were living your dream life where we'll use financial freedom, or we'll use, the work that you truly want that's aligned with your purpose. If you had the answer, you would be living it right now. And so the more time that we spend thinking and thinking, we're just generating the same beliefs, the same ways of thinking, and the same actions that got us to this point in time. And it's not an insult to people. It's not to say, you're your own problem. No, that's not what that means. It just means that you have to go out into the real world and apply and follow your nose. We just were never taught this in school. You're taught how to be a straight A student and get your good grades and get your college degree, but that's an illusion.
Totally. And were you supported on this path by your family?
In terms of just like mom and dad being like, yes, go for it.
Yeah.
I'm so fortunate because my mom is very intuitive like me. She's a spiritual person. I reckon she's definitely like some form of an angel for sure. I'm insanely blessed to have really good parents. My mom was really supportive. She told me from a young age, you're going to be an entrepreneur. It's like, you're going to be an entrepreneur. So your mom typically knows. By the way, great thing. If someone's stuck and trying to figure out some ideas for maybe some meaningful work, go ask your mom. Say, what do you think I'm going to be? Or like, what am I uniquely good at? Or what are my strengths? And they'll tell you. That'll be huge. My dad is a linear thinker. He's old school, hey, Mick, you got to grind. That's what he told me my whole life. You got to grind, man. You got to work hard. And I think in the beginning, and I love my dad very much, but I think in the beginning, he's very, very old school, like kind of, you're going to be a life coach. Like, what the, like this probably wasn't thinking this was going to work. And he didn't understand it. I think just a totally different, he sees things in very black and white, and my mom just straight away, she got it and she knew it. And she was like, oh my God, you're going to do really well in this. But at the whole time, my dad was like, I love you and I'm going to support you. But I think it took him a solid year for him to be like, yeah, like I get it now. Cause I just kept like telling him over and over, like what I do. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. And so how do you support other men whose maybe both parents don't support them in their new path to follow their heart?
Yeah, it's a really, really challenging question to answer, right? Because we put so much stock into what other people think and even our own parents. And there's been a lot of points in my journey in my life where my parents were not on board with a lot of stuff. I mean, when I finished college, I quit my teaching job and I moved to New Zealand and they were totally opposed to it. My grandfather actually wrote me a letter and essentially said, what the hell are you doing? Before I left, he was like, at your age, I had a family, I had a job, I had retirement savings, I had served in the Navy. And I've lived pretty much a life where a lot of my cousins, my aunts and uncles, still even to this day, what are you doing? When are you going to get a real job? And you have to block out the noise. You have to understand that every person in the world, including your parents, who you maybe love very dearly, your friends, your best friends, they're not you. They're living off of their own belief system, their own judgments and insecurities and experiences from their life. And so when someone tells you something negative, that you're not going to make it, or what are you doing? That's typically when you know you're on the right path. I think a lot of the times that's when you typically know you're walking your own way. So the way that we support guys is that we have a community, we have group calls, we have one-on-one coaching. So we've got this whole kind of network of guys that are tapped into our space that are supporting each other, which I think in this day and age, finding a tribe of people that actually understand you and are walking a similar path, that have answers, that's changed the game for me. Because when I was a guy getting into the coaching space, I was coaching people, but I had never actually had a coach, right? And when I started to work with coaches and actually take that ego hit, wow, life kind of took on a whole different direction.
Yeah, I think community is one of the most essential parts of life. And it's like, yes, you need to be strong in your own choices and walk your own path, but like you also have to have that support so that like holds you as you do this. And community has so many benefits. So I'm really happy that you have that. And I guess on the other end, like, how do you help men that like finally get these big financial goals and get all these things, stay rooted in their truth and not stuck in the ego, like the opposite end?
Yeah. Lexy, you ask some really, really good questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. So part of one of the concepts that we're teaching in it, hopefully this doesn't sound too woo-woo, but part of what we're teaching here in the community is that you have to start to view yourself as a character, right? And I think that takes the pressure off in a lot of ways. So if you think about what got you up into this point in time, it's a collection of beliefs, it's a collection of stories, it's a collection of experiences. And a lot of people develop a really strong sense of self, a really strong sense of like, this is the true me. Like, I am Mike Morelli and I am this way. I am an introvert. Or they took a personality test one time and they said, I am a INTJ or whatever. And so people keep reaffirming their story to themselves all the time. Oh, this happened to me 2 years ago. And so-and-so said this, or so really when you break the mold of that character. And one of the ways that you can do that very easily is by doing the opposite of things that you traditionally would not do. Right. So if you say, I am an introvert, you should go and try to host a party. You should try to go out to take salsa dancing lessons and laugh with, go out with a group of people and just do things totally different that kind of breaks the mold. But when you start to really see yourself as just this character, you can consciously choose however you want to show up in the world. This is free will. That's what that is. And so the way that you can stay rooted in that is by a simple understanding. Again, a lot of this is just kind of a mental, like real understanding that, your character can and will change. Who you are right now is not who you're going to be in 5 years. Things change. Your beliefs change. Don't take yourself so seriously, but instead you can view yourself as someone who is adaptable to whatever situation that needs be. So for example, Lexy, I'm actually, really enjoying just quiet time. I enjoy meditation. I enjoy being alone. I'll go out into the woods for 3 days by myself in a tent and I'll be stoked. But in situations where I need to become more extroverted, it's totally fine. On our group calls, when I'm, leading people in coaching, when I'm creating content per se, when I'm going out with my friends, you can break out of character and it's totally fine. So a lot of that is ego stuff, right? We become so attached to this idea that there's one true me out there. And the reality is there is not one true you. How could there be in a world that is always evolving? And so just that viewpoint, I think, really allows yourself to just not take yourself so seriously, which has been probably my biggest problem ever,
Yeah. It's a big one for men, but anyone, but like, especially men.
Totally for men. 100%. You're spot on with that. So, yeah,
I think that's important because the more that you can, I think adaptability is one of the biggest skills we can have in life, because when you think in that black and white way, you're limiting yourself from so much. And it's like these labels, like we love labels in society, and I think they can be good, but it's also like they constrict you. And it's like, yes, you can be an introvert and extrovert. Like I'm both. I'm totally both. Like some days I love my alone time. Then I can also go out to the social gathering and have fun. But it's like being able to know that you're not just one type. And I used to be so afraid because when I was younger, I've always kind of been like this. I've always had different friend groups, and people are like, oh, you're what's the word? Like chameleon or whatever. Like you just like change to your environment. But I'm like, actually, I have a lot of parts of my personality, and I think we all do, but we're not accessing all parts of ourselves.
And that's, I think, why a lot of people deal with this imposter syndrome, right? Because they do things that they want to do things internally that go against typically the way they've been acting. So, your friends be like, oh, you're a chameleon. You just like, you're not true to whatever. But those are people actually just voicing their own insecurity and wish that they could be more adaptable. Right. And that's always what that is. And so, again, the imposter syndrome is under the belief that we should be a certain way, that there is a true self. And that idea was something that I searched for a long time. And I realized that there isn't, because fundamentally, if you think about the way evolution and nature works, and we are a part of nature, like we are not separate from it. We came from it.
Yeah.
You can realize that, wow, I'm a part of this thing called evolution, which is change, constant change. And so just allow yourself to let go a little bit and do some things differently. And if you want to, last night, I'm not a big drinker, but I saw a bottle of wine at the store. And I said, I want to have a glass of wine tonight. And internally I was like, no, don't. Like you've just been like two to 3 months without drinking any alcohol, like stay clean. And I was like, nah, that's when I know I'm going to have a glass of wine tonight. You gotta live. Yes.
I agree. I haven't drank for like 4 years, but if I want to occasionally I will, but it's not like, once again, it's like if we choose to be sober, like I didn't even tell people I was sober for a long time because I didn't want to fall into that label. Like people think if you say those words and if you drink, they're like, oh, point the finger, but it's like, no, this just can be like a basis of what it means, So I think that's a great point you brought up. And then I think the last thing I want to say is, how do you help support men that like, it's obviously really hard for men to get help. So how do you help them make that step if they're like, oh, that sounds cool to have a men's coach, but like the ego is still too strong. Like what's, like, how can you just like, it's going to help you? Because I think men's work is so important and not enough men are tapping into that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So you're saying the question is asking, how do we help men break the ego of I don't know if that is a process that we do it, but it's actually a process that they do themselves, right? Because when, let's say someone like reaches out and they're like, hey, I want to join the program, or I just want to find out what you do, or, like Scott and I, we just help first, always just help first, provide clarity, provide resources. And if it sounds like you're a good fit into the program, then you're welcome to join. And I think that initial process of guys just reaching out and saying, hey, I need help. That is like one of the biggest things right there. So if you're a guy, just go reach out and ask for help. If you're actually a guy that resonates with this podcast, you should just reach out to Scott and myself and just say, hey man, can we just have a chat? Because I think what that does is that just challenges the ego. The ego wants to say, I don't need help. I have all the answers. And so let's say that you're a guy in the program and you start doing the work. All that work that you do is invariably going to just challenge the ego because it's unlearning, right? We talk about that deprogramming, and you're just stripping away all these layers of, excuse my language, but just bullshit, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it is. And so through the work, which is done by yourself always, right? Like no one can change you except for you. I think that's a really important thing. Just the process of being willing to challenge your belief system and admit that you're wrong is a superpower. It is a superpower.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best superpowers out there. And I think what you said is perfect. Like, I know you don't do that in your program, but it's just like that invitation. It's like, it's so much better to get help. It's just so much better. And I think more men are softening to it. And even women, like therapy has been so stigmatized for years. And I think now we're starting to see how important mental health is. And like when you help yourself, you're helping everyone in your community. It's impossible to not share what you learn with everyone around you.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's it. I think that's what work is boiling down to as we start to go into this digital age where, this idea that you're going to show up to, this industrial revolution that we're coming out of is dead, right? It's dying before our eyes right now. It's being replaced by technology. And this is a good thing. People are scared of that, but it's actually a good thing because we don't need people packing boxes at Amazon. We need people adding their unique talent, skills, and value to the world that every single person on earth has. It doesn't mean that you're going to become an entrepreneur per se, but I think we're moving into an age where there's more high value work contributing to society. And I think that's a good thing because I want to live in a world where people are adding their own unique stamp. Right. So yeah, that's a big thing.
It gave me the chills. It's so true. I always say that. I truly believe that everyone has their own gifts. And even if you're like, no, I don't, it's like, no, you just haven't found them yet. It's like, you do have them just if you're not connected to them. So thank you so much. I've really loved chatting with you. And the last question of the podcast is, what was the last time you made someone laugh?
Did I make you laugh just now?
That doesn't count because I always laugh.
All right. The last time I made someone laugh, that I guess it would be my buddy that I live with, but that doesn't really count. I would say I would say that I feel like it cycles back to the Costa Rican soda yesterday, the little restaurante. I was like trying to speak Spanish and those girls were like cracking up. It's not horrible, but my Spanish is pretty bad, but we're doing always do your best.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you so much. And if people want to work with you, what are you offering and how can they find you?
Yeah, so peakprosper.com. What we can do is, I think we could probably just link a thing where you could book a call below, but we also have some free content on our website. We've got a free training video that's super valuable, a ton of free resources on our website if you want to learn more. We also have a private Facebook group, just free, where guys can come in, connect with us. We share exclusive content. That's facebook.com/peakprosper. But yeah, so what we're offering right now, we've got the 2.0 transformation program. There's a whole bunch of stuff inside of that. So, but really fundamentally, Lexy, I would just say that if you're someone that's interested, the first thing that Scott and I do is we just help first, right? And if it feels like you're a good fit for the program, then we would make you an offer. But we just really want to connect with people and find out if we can help you first, and and then we just go from there.
So essential. It's like truly heart-centered, which I love. And I'm so grateful for what you do. And I'm so excited to see more impact that you have on this world, and hopefully a bunch more men come your way.
I appreciate you so much, Lexy. It was a great podcast. You got some really good questions. So
thank you.